Hi, this is Debonee Morgan, and you're listening to The Spirit of Now, Zeitgeist's podcast, where we speak with spiritual influencers and people who are making a difference in our community. Today, we're talking with Rabbi Mitch Cohen about his upcoming workshop on the Enneagram and Kabbalah, entitled Applying the Enneagram and Kabbalah to an Awakened Life. Rabbi Mitch is a certified life coach focusing on the mystical, sacred experiences, a certified interspiritual spiritual director, certified by Zeitgeist, I might add, and an Enneagram certified professional. Mitch supports anyone on their individual personal and spiritual journey, regardless of their beliefs or past observance of faith tradition. He uses the Enneagram, the sefirot, and dream work in his support of people in their secular and spiritual lives. So welcome, Mitch.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited about the workshop and about having our conversation today because there seems like there's so much to learn, even for people who are familiar with the Enneagram. But my first question is, let's say we've got some new people showing up and they may not even understand where they fall in the Enneagram. Like what exactly is this and how do I know what number I am?
Well, I got interested in the Enneagram a while back because unlike the Myers-Briggs and the DISC and other personality assessment models, we're not pigeonholed into one particular type. In fact, we're all 9 types. We have a predominant type. We're born in with a combination of temperament that we just come into the world with and early life experiences. And what I like about the Ready assessment, it gives you a numerical evaluation for each 9 of your types. And I learned this from Dr. Luby, but any score above 20 is what you accelerate the gas pedal in your car journeying through life. So some people that I've worked with have 2 types above 20. Some, like me, have 4 above 20. So I tend to drive with 4 types. Anything below 20 and above 10 is going to be kind of gliding, and below 10 is what you hit the brake with. So it kind of gives you assessment of what's in balance, what needs to be developed further.
That's interesting. So it sounds like you're suggesting that the Ready, the RHETI tool is your preferred thing, and that's what maybe people should take before they come to the workshop?
They really should. And there are other narrative type assessments, and clients that I've worked with, sometimes they'll score a tie on the Ready assessment. So I use these narrative paragraphs to kind of break the tie. Some people just don't like multiple guess tests. It's 144 questions. So the narratives would be the next best thing. But to really get the best sense is to take the Ready. And here's the key, is take the Ready like you are on the weekends or on vacation, because we have a different persona that we show up to work with.
Right. That's great. So the workshop, I love how unique this is, which is overlaying Kabbalah on top of the Enneagram. So what are some of the congruences or places where this comes together?
The main place that I see it actually where the congruences are not only the sefirot, which are the divine emanations, I'll touch on that in a second, but are the 4 worlds. So Kabbalah teaches that there are 4 worlds that we move along in life, and it starts at the bottom world. The Asiya is the Hebrew word, but it's sort of the ego place that we arrive into the world and how we operate. This would be equivalent to sort of the lower levels of development according to the Enneagram teachings. And as we get healthier in our ways of understanding and becoming aware of our behaviors, both that support us and both that hold us back, we move up into these worlds. So it starts off at sort of the world of ego. It kind of goes up into the world of mutuality, and then the world of interpersonality, and then integration with divine essence, if you will. And that's equivalent to levels 2 down through 6 of the 9 levels within the Enneagram. Mm-hmm. So I like to look at those, and there's work that individuals can do to move along both the Enneagram levels moving up and also the four worlds moving up. But now with the sefirot, so Kabbalah teaches that, I'll make this very short, but there's a Lurianic Kabbalistic teaching of the creation of the universe. And the infinite divine was putting forth divine light into the finite universe that it wanted to create. And this primordial divine light filled these 10 vessels. But the vessels couldn't hold the light, and they exploded. And these shards of vessel impregnated with this divine light went across the universe. So every time that we do an act of loving kindness or to make the world a better place, it's as if we're redeeming one of these shards of light. And at the end of all of us redeeming all these shards, we'll be in the highest integrated level that we can be in connection with the divine. But the top level, the highest level, keter, means crown. So if we take that out of the 10, because that's in that infinite realm according to Kabbalistic teachings, that leaves the lower 9. And those each are assigned to one of the 9 Enneagram types. Now, Kabbalah teaches that we are born into the world with our blueprint, all 10 of these sefirot, that are out of balance. There are male energies, there are female energies, and there are balancing energies. And our mission in life is to develop all of our male and female energies so that they are firmly balanced. Now, what I love about that teaching is it says that all of us are divine manifestations of male and female energies. So there is no such thing as he, Lord, King, God. That Kabbalah teaches that God is it. There's no male or female. And this blueprint was used to create us as well. So if we look at each of the 9 Enneagram types, there's one of the 9 lower sefirot assigned to it. And that's how they come together, is you can do work with our particular predominant Enneagram type, as well as a corresponding sefirot. So for example, I'm a type 2 Enneagram, right? Bina is one of these Kabbalistic emanations. So I look at the definition of type 2 as a caregiver, caretaker type. The Enneagram, the Sephirah that is assigned to that Bina means understanding and intuition. So what that tells me is as I'm developing, rising up these lower levels of my Enneagram type to use more effective behaviors, I'm also learning how to draw more from my intuition and understand my own personal needs, which a type 2 is very difficult for them to understand their needs. We're always looking at everybody else's other needs. So that's how you work with both.
That's really exciting. You know, so often when people teach the Enneagram, they're more focused on an awareness of understanding the types, which is fantastic, but not always emphasizing the developmental aspect of it. So this is great to hear that you're not only understanding the types and providing people with some insight for themselves, but also the developmental piece of it as well. So there is sort of an organic spirituality in that, but can you say some more about the spiritual aspects per se of Enneagram and Kabbalah and that integration?
Sure. And a lot of teachers of Enneagram don't necessarily focus on the spiritual aspect of it. Maybe spiritual directors do, like you and I, but most don't. And I'm not quite sure why that is, because in my mind, regardless of the fact that I'm a rabbi, I'm a human being. I believe that any work that a human being does to develop themselves is spiritual work. Mm-hmm. So if you see a psychotherapist and you're working through some old wounds, regardless of what therapeutic tool you're using, to me, that's a form of worship. You know, you are clearing the way so that we can all get back to our true divine nature, which is at the core of us. Enneagram does that because early teachings of the Enneagram is when we were born into this world, we came with our true divine essence. But because of circumstances in life, a balance of temperament, as well as environment or nature and nurture, experiences we had with our early caregivers, parents, teachers, grandparents, we were drawn to one of these types. So in essence, we lost contact with his divine essence. And each Enneagram type has a particular divine essence characteristic that's assigned to it. For example, I'm most familiar with type 2, that's what I am. So it's divine will. And what that means is that I lost contact with the fact that it's the will of the universe that all of our needs would be important and equally met. We should all be loving and kind and giving to each other. I lost touch with that as a child and went into more survival mode, which is the ego fixation and the passion behavior when I got away from the virtuous behavior of a type 2. And each type has the same thing assigned to it. So from the Enneagram side, the work is to develop and get back in touch with the original divine essence that we lost contact with. And I agree with what you said before. Awareness of one's personality type is nice to know. Maybe it's good to have a beer with somebody and discuss it, but it does nothing for our development and growth. But understanding, how our type gets in our way, really it takes us on the road to working with it and to develop the more virtuous characteristics of our type. Same thing with Kabbalah.
Neat. Yeah, for me, when working with Richard Rohr, I had not taken the test, but Richard believes that you just sort of become familiar and see what fits for yourself. And the positive aspects of it, I felt like I could have been any of several types. But when I looked at the challenges and the growth area, that helped me zone in. That was much easier for me to see. And then later working with Dr. Lubba, Jerome, and taking the Ready, it sort of it played out that way. But all of that to just agree with you that the growth opportunities is where the juice is, the places where you find yourself stumbling. So this is a lot of stuff, right? The Enneagram is a lot. We could do a week-long conference, and other people have, just on the Enneagram, and Kabbalah is a lifelong study, right? So Mitch, how are you going to help us grasp the good stuff in one day?
Well, I'm coming in with a giant fire hose, and everybody's going to drink from the fire hose. No, all I'm going to do is kind of, as I've mentioned, I've been studying Kabbalah for over 30 years. I took it in graduate school. So there's a lot of esoteric aspects to it that I'm not interested in sharing or teaching. Not that it's not important, but you're right. It would take 6 months for anybody to really get somewhat of a grasp. All I'm focusing on is the tree of life, right? The Eitz Chaim, which has those 10 sefirot, or these divine emanations, and the 4 worlds that I mentioned before. That's it. Those 2 aspects. And then, how do they pertain to, as I said earlier, the 4 worlds will equate with levels 2 down through 6, even though the math is different. A couple of the worlds have 2 levels assigned to them. This is what they represent. And of course, as I said, take out Keter or crown, the divine infinite. We left with the lower 9. And that's assigned to one of the Enneagram types. So it's just simply, I'll be teaching what each of those 9 sefirot are. I'll be sharing a few of the characteristics of that type. Or the sephira, not type, that's more Enneagram language. And then we'll work through together learning some practices, some inquiry that people can go in with each of their predominant type with the assigned Kabbalistic sephira and do some work around that.
Yeah, that's great. That was the next thing I was going to ask is, how exactly, so we've got this great intellectual download, but are there things that we can do now that we've got that? What happens next?
That's why I designed the course. the workshop. In fact, the first time I did it, it was just on the Enneagram, but I added the Kabbalah piece to it. I've taken many workshops in my life. You have as well. And I'm not interested in taking nor teaching something that's just fills the brain with information, because 5 hours later, it's gone. It's like, who cares, right? But my intention of doing this, yes, of course, the first, 3.5 hours are going to be just teaching elements and aspects. But the last hour and a half, we're going to be doing breakout groups with some of these practices. And the idea is for people to take away with them some of these practices so that they can implement them, should they choose, in the days, weeks, months, years ahead. And really, truly, that's the best way to work with either Enneagram or Kabbalah. And my wish for everyone would, if you're just going to pick one, pick Enneagram, and just work with that. But don't just learn your type. And by God, please do not diagnose anyone else. As you know, you're a therapist. You only diagnose your clients, right? And a lot of modern therapists don't even diagnose anymore, right? We're all somewhere along the spectrum of neurotic. So it's just a matter of what neuroses do you want to work with. Well, same thing with the Enneagram. Just don't, I do premarital counseling, and it's always frustrating when one partner comes in and they've already have some knowledge of the Enneagram, and they'll say, oh, she's a type 4. I just know it. So, that just don't do that.
Yeah, hold it very lightly. So, Mitch, how did you get interested in any of this to begin with? What piqued your interest and drew you to the Enneagram and also Kabbalah?
Well, serendipity. So Kabbalah, I was reading Joan Borysenko, Dark Night of the Soul. And I want to say that was probably 1994. And there was this word she kept on mentioning in her book called Kabbalah. And I'd never heard of it. And she kept on referring to a Jewish teaching. So I went to my rabbi at the time. I was like, have you ever heard of this Kabbalah stuff? And he's like, yeah. I said, I'm interested in learning. I was about 32 years old at the time. And he took this book off of his shelf called Honey from the Rock by Lawrence Kushner. I got 5 pages in, and it was everything I ever wanted in Judaism. And that started the journey. So that's what got me interested in that. As I said, saw it in a Joan Borysenko book. And then my rabbi pulled Kushner's book off the shelf, gave it to me. I read everything Kushner ever wrote after that. And of course, many of the other famous authors. And then in graduate school, Jewish studies, I took a course. And then as far as Enneagram, again, serendipity. I didn't know what an Enneagram was, but as you know, I co-founded the Neshama Interfaith Center with Kathy Crosby and Marion Monahan, and they mentioned, what your Enneagram type is? I'm like, it's an Enneagram. So, okay, great. And then Rami Shapiro, of course, when I got involved doing some work with him, he's like, what's your Enneagram type? It's like, well, that's 2 people that have asked me in the past 6 months, I need to look into this. So Marion recommended a book, and I read it and loved it. It had a shorter assessment in it. And then, like a lot of us, I wanted to go deeper and took the Ready assessment and started reading Riesel and Hudson's books, and then did the 2 40-hour trainings with Enneagram Atlanta to get certified to be a consultant. So none of it was, just me, I wonder what this is. It was like outside sources kind of knocking on my door, which I'm a firm believer in serendipity or divine intervention, or as Lawrence Kushner says, coincidences are just God being anonymous.
Yeah, the right thing tends to show up at the right time, huh? So, Mitch, we're all excited about learning from you on Saturday, February 20th. And I'm sure that we're going to take away a lot to digest afterwards. For folks that either are unable to make the workshop or would like some more teaching to continue to go deeper. Is this something that you do as part of your spiritual direction practice? Are you available for individual coaching and direction on Enneagram and Kabbalah?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm one of the, I shouldn't say the few, I don't know every spiritual director, but I know that I'm making an important piece when I start out with any of my directees. Either they've taken it, like I just started with a directee last week, and she's fairly knowledgeable of her type, understands a lot of the lingo. It's going to make our work together pretty simple. But I usually first 2 or 3 sessions are just going to be on the Enneagram. And the reason why I do that is it allows me to know what the listening is on the other side of the, well, now it's Zoom, but eventually the other side of the table. I can more effectively work with people when I understand how they listen. I can more effectively work with people when I know what triggers them, so I can avoid that. I can also manage my own stuff, when I get triggered or it comes up. So yes, it's an important piece of my spiritual direction. But even life coaching, when I do stuff outside of a spiritual context, also it's a very important initial piece of it. And as you and I talked about earlier, it's a requirement when I officiate weddings in premarital counseling for people to both take the ready and for us to work about conflict management given their type, lower level of development behaviors that might show up. So yes, I think it's a very important tool in the work that I do with clients.
That's terrific. And so we'll make sure that people have access to your website. And of course, they'll have access to you if they register for our workshop on February 20th. We're going to get started at 11 in the morning and go till 5 in the afternoon. We will take a lunch break. But the great thing about this medium is that they'll be able to ask all the questions of you, Mitch, and engage with the teaching instead of just downloading it. And that's a great opportunity. Other than taking the ready ahead of time, is there anything else that you would want people to know or do in order to get the most out of their time with you?
Not really. I've learned over the years that people show up where they are. So, there are going to be those people that are going to go online and do all kinds of research before they come in, and that's fine. In fact, it may be somewhat useful to do a little bit of research if you've not done much with the Enneagram, to go to the Enneagram Institute website where you download the ready. There's a lot of good documentation in there. You can look up something about the tree of life in Kabbalah if you want to get a little bit of understanding. There's some garbage out there, unfortunately, when it comes to Kabbalah, but most stuff is pretty decent. But really, just show up, as the Buddhists say, with an empty bowl of rice. You can't add anything to a full bowl of rice. So even if you're extremely knowledgeable of the Enneagram or extremely knowledgeable of Kabbalah, I would invite people to come in with the empty bowl and listen as if you haven't heard it before, or maybe there's a new way that it's going to be presented that can deepen your learning.
I like that so much. Well, thanks so much for your conversation today, Mitch. We'll look forward to the 20th and invite those listening to join us there. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much.